Hey everybody, don't go anywhere. We've got another great session coming right up right now. So yeah, stay tuned. It's Lisa Jackson from Apple, and she's going to talk all about environmental initiatives at Apple. Obviously, largest device maker in the world, and they just had their event announcing, doing the work behind me, announcing their new iPhone and their latest Apple Watches. And they've got the first ever fully carbon neutral Apple product as part of that, which is the aluminum Apple Watch when paired with the Sport Loop band. And they even committed to offsetting all of the charging energy that goes into powering those. So basically they estimate like how much is used to charge all of these watches everywhere in the world, and then they pay for carbon neutral energy initiatives to compensate for that. So really, really cool, super exciting. And she also got to star opposite Octavia Spencer in a Apple video describing all of this, which is really cool too. But she's going to be talking with our own Matthew Panzarino, and let's welcome them up.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I really like the kicks. I think they're fantastic.
Thank you. They were Nike Earth Day edition, but they were also a gift from my kids for the holidays.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, thanks.
Nice, double win. Okay, so you and I last spoke 2017, and that was a couple of years into kind of your tenure at Apple, working on environmental and policy and all of that stuff. And you know, at the time, a carbon neutral product was still many years away, a full carbon neutral product. And now we're here, and that first product is the Apple Watch with the Sport Loop, I guess, is the first exact or precise model that is carbon neutral for Apple. Why start with the watch? What was the impetus behind that?
Well, we have been working, Apple's a product company, and we work across the company with so many teams. And what we challenged ourselves to do, because we're constantly trying to find a way to engage these engineers in the work of the environment, was to really pick a product and just drill on the materials. So drill on the energy used for manufacturing it, drill on, not drill, but work hard with our supply chain. And so Watch was the closest. It isn't, cynical to say it isn't as big as iPhone, and so iPhone's going to take longer. But we thought it was important to sort of lay out how we're going to do this work for every product, because you mentioned 2017, so just a little history. 2018 is when we said, hey, the whole company's running on clean energy. By 2020, hey, the company's carbon neutral for all of our own operations. But we were inspired to try to pick this really aggressive carbon neutral goal. All of our products will be carbon neutral by 2030. So it was a little bit of an opportunity for us to give a real life proof point of the kind of technology and innovation and sort of across the company work that you have to do to make a 2030 goal like that.
Gotcha. And that work had a lot of components to it, internal to Apple, external to Apple. You mentioned suppliers. Can you talk a little bit about how Apple's thinking about balancing their offsets and outputs, and the carbon credits, manufacturing, energy usage? You mentioned charging offsets. Like Scope 3 emissions is notoriously tough to deal with, because the things you can control, you can at least directly deal with them, right? So what about the things you can't? So how does Apple think about balancing those?
Yeah, one of the things I love is that we are a hardware and a software company. And so our first challenge was to say, what does it mean to make a product carbon neutral? Now, we all know that science says we have to reduce absolute emissions by 90 or 95% by 2050, but we're talking 2030, and it's a goal we set for ourselves. So we said we want to maximize the use of clean energy. We want to maximize the use of renewable or recycled material, because that has a lower intrinsic carbon footprint than virgin material. And then we want to use, after that's been maximized as much as it can, no more than about 25% of the footprint could be offset. In the case of Apple Watch Series 9, it's about 22%. We removed the emissions, 78%. The emissions went down, and the remaining had to be, is offset. Didn't have to be, but we chose to offset it. And the reason for that is because in general, we're not offsetting supplier energy. We're not offsetting any energy at all. We're either offsetting a very small amount of direct emissions that we just technologically need to come up with new processes on, or logistics and transportation.
Right.
Now, logistics, we're able to cut some just by shifting from air transportation to other modes. But realistically, we weren't going to say, hey, we've bought up all the sustainable fuel in the world and we're using it. That sounds great,
Yeah.
but we really need that industry to continue to move along.
And that trickles down to things like packaging, obviously, right? And maximizing space and logistics and supply chain stuff,
yeah,
which
thank
gets,
you for
which
reminding
gets
me.
complex.
Yeah, the packaging's much smaller.
Yeah.
It's it's light. It's a light product. It's smaller, so you get more packages. But logistics turns out to be a big deal when you're operating at the scale we are.
And do you think iPhone, I mean, obviously, not asking for time zone or time scale exactly, but do you think iPhone's going to be much closer to 23? Is it a much more complex deal, or is the framework that Apple Watch is using very applicable to the other products across the lineup?
The framework will be the same. We're going to limit ourselves in our use of offsets. We're going to insist. What we said is all the energy used was clean energy, but also every single supplier that is engaged in Apple Watch that we deal with has signed up to be 100% renewable as well. So that is going to have a huge impact, not just for us. It's going to have a huge impact for those suppliers and all the people they work with in a customer relationship. And we're going to continue to have more and more recycled material, certainly not less than 30% recycled by weight. So yeah, the idea was let's put this out. Let's be as transparent as we can. We do that every year. We're reporting on it so that people can really get a sense of what it takes to take these products carbon neutral and to do it at scale. And iPhone, I don't have a date, but we're working really hard.
Well, and you mentioned the transparency thing, which I think is interesting because Apple is, I think it's completely fair to say, they're a fairly secretive company, like to keep things under the covers until they're ready to pull the cover back at their events like the one we just had. But with the supply chain changes, with the ESG efforts and the environmental efforts, they've been unnaturally for Apple, transparent and detailed. And I've read some of these reports. I read a lot of them all the way through when they started, and ever since then keep up on at least the basics. And you've been talking a lot about exact processes that you've gone through to do this. So what's the transparency for here? Are you trying to create an industry-wide template that people can use to do this themselves?
Well, first off, transparency is really important because people have been burned before. Burned is probably not the right word when you're talking about climate change, but people have heard too many companies come up and make claims or make promises, and then when you look into it, as you should, there's less there than you'd like to see. So we've been reporting all along. That's one of them, but I think transparency is incredibly important. The other thing is, Tim's been really clear that the work we do has to be able to scale and ripple outward, which means it's not charity work. This is not philanthropy. We're not out just spending money so we can make this claim to make other people feel great. It has to be something that businesses in our supply chain can take on without, sacrificing their ability to also make a profit. That's what they're in business to do. And so that's
Because it moves from a cost center to a profit center, right? Like you take the slider and move it over to, hey, this thing will make you money if you do it right.
Right.
Yeah.
Clean energy is cheaper and can be scaled. You have to understand what's real. So you don't want to make an investment in something and find out that it's either you're double counting, it's not additional, it's not real, it's on the wrong grid. I could name a million things, and I'm sure the audience knows about it. But instead of standing up and just saying, here, listen to us and do what we do, let's work closely with the supply chain. If they switch, as now over 300 have committed to do, if they're in process, if they put 15 gigawatts of clean energy along with us on grids around the world, that's the proof point. And they continue to do business and make money. And then they are going out to their suppliers. So for us, it's about creating that continual ripple out, and doing it the way a business would do it, not the way a philanthropy would, and not the way government would, because that's not our role.
And one of the big components of this sort of effort to have products be more sustainable across Apple's ecosystem has been, in recent years especially, Apple's talked a lot about repairability. And so how does repairability factor into the overall longevity of Apple products, the recycling of them into the universe, and how does that fit into your climate goals?
Yeah, we've evolved on repairability, I think, in a very good way. And there are two considerations. There's a long life of a product, which I think everyone acknowledges. Apple makes a product that can last a very long time, and the software upgrades are great. That's wonderful. We make this hardware, but you have to balance that with how easy it is to repair, because sometimes the thing that makes it easiest to take apart is the thing that makes it last less long. So you really, for us, goal one would be it never needs to be repaired.
Right.
But we live in the real world, so repairability is fair, and we've continually expanded the network of repairers who can do Apple repairs and have access to Apple parts and even Apple tools. So that's important. And I think that kind of culminated recently in Apple's support of the California repair bill. And so, that's a journey. It's fair to say. I will say that having worked with the hardware engineering team, they will always, it's in their blood, err on the side of it's just got to last. We don't ever want a customer coming in because the phone was shoddily designed or made.
Yeah, and I mean, I have personally repaired, I have 2 young children, so I have personally repaired some shattered glass backs, et cetera. So I'm really happy to see that the new ones are easier to replace. That's a big one.
Cool.
Let's take it back a little bit. What was your process like when you got the offer or the outreach from Apple? I'm guessing Tim was involved, to come work for them and to sort of kick off this 2030 initiative. I want to hear that pitch, because obviously working in government, you probably had a firsthand view of how much corporations were utilizing greenwash or sort of leveraging reputation repair or leveraging ESG for reputation repair versus building into their corporate nature. So how hard did the pitch have to be for you to believe that they actually wanted to do something realistic?
I mean, I had worked 20 plus years in government. I had worked my way up from a staff level engineer at EPA, that was one of my very first jobs, to running the Environmental Protection Agency for President Obama. I had a reputation. It's not, I don't want to sound, but my reputation was based on my belief that this had to be real. And it had to be good for communities. You couldn't sacrifice over a community over here to achieve an environmental goal somewhere else, especially on climate change, which is a global goal. And so communities can feel left out. So we have a saying in Washington about who is calling and asking for what. In Washington, you'll get a call all the time. The White House wants this. The White House is a building. Doesn't have a mouth, doesn't have a brain. Well, no. So who? So part of the Apple pitch, I don't want to give away Tim's secret sauce, was it was Tim. It wasn't some Apple recruiter. It wasn't even someone from the people team. They're great. It was Tim. And that told me a lot about where where this was coming from. It was important to him. He knew that a company should have responsibility, and one of the things he cared about deeply was that we live up to our environmental responsibility. At that time, there was no 2030. We knew climate change. We had 3 priorities. But the other thing he did, and it's really nostalgic for me because my very first day of work was at Dub DC in 2013 in this building, probably very near to here. And the second day, you always go to work with your boss at Apple. You're on your first day, but I had to do second because he was on stage at Dub. And I said, okay, I'm here. What do you want me to do? And he said, that's what I want you to tell me. I want you to learn who we are, which is incredibly important, and then tell us what is the roadmap to make us the leader, the ripple in the pond that I want us to be, the company to be under my leadership. And that's been an incredible gift. And then the last thing I'll say about why Apple was scale. If you run the EPA, you get to make decisions, for good or bad, that impact millions of people potentially. I wanted the ability to take what I had been working on and maybe scale it to impact some of the same or different people and do it from the private sector approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even if you talk to like kind of engineers or, high-profile people that get recruited by Apple, I think oftentimes more than anything, they mention the fact that being able to impact people at scale, launch things at scale, is super important to them. And I think that the sustainability universe often doesn't look at it that way, right? They look at it as like, oh, hey, you're a compliance officer of some sort. Like it's a negative force inside the company versus a positive force, a force that's additive, that can add value. Because you hire a high-profile engineer, theoretically they're going to deliver high-quality product, et cetera. So how have you recruited people over time to your team in that kind of vein?
Yeah, such an interesting question. So I totally agree with you. Sustainability cannot be a thing that's bolted on at the beginning, middle, or end of any process. It has to be inside. And the fact is the team I run, is pretty small on the sustainability side. I also do some other work for Apple, but if you take those people off, it's really pretty small. And the reason is because the team is actually across the company. So we have folks in hardware engineering, in product design, in industrial design, in software engineering. Just this last product, we shipped grid forecasts where you can actually use the Home app to understand the cleanliness of your grid. When is it cleaner, so I can decide when to run appliances in my home. Grid forecast. And that involved the software team. So what you have to do is start to build a cadre of people, whether it's maps, whether it's anywhere within the company, marketing and communications, PR, all of whom are working on this set of issues. And try, you don't need everybody. And it's not fair to think everybody can, but if you're thinking about a new product, having people across all those areas, they're in rooms I'll never be able to be in, and my team couldn't. So the team has grown by incorporating more of the company, not by taking people out of where they were in general and bringing them to me. It's actually going out.
Yeah, and it makes sense because you're also creating more of a mandate because those people exist in their department. They're not pulled out separately and then giving inputs from outside, right?
And it's a gift because in general, the average Apple employee is younger than me and they get it. They get it. They understand that this is their future, that they're having a chance to try to feel great about working for a company that is dedicated to trying to make sure that the future is brighter and cleaner.
How impactful to the overall plan was deleting leather from the lineup? I'm kind of curious about that. And then there's a part B to that, but I'll ask you, how impactful was the leather thing?
Leather is a material that we got lots of comments and thoughts about. And it's one that we have been talking about for quite some time. Look, no one is saying or pretending to say, I don't want to be a hypocrite in any way, that it means, no one at Apple uses or wears leather. It's in the video. There's actually a guy wearing a leather jacket, which I thought was a cute way of making that point. But it became part of the material sustainability program. What we say is we want to use all recycled and renewable materials. We'd love to one day make your brand new Apple device from nothing that had to be mined from the ground or taken in a way that that leather has to be, requires the footprint, the water footprint that leather does. And so it just felt like it was time. Also because our industrial design team had been working forever on what would be the next material. So fine woven is that material. It isn't a vegan leather. I mean, there's lots of that out there, but it was their attempt to offer something that felt and had a luxuriousness about it, but that felt like an Apple innovation.
Yeah, that was my part B, is like the fine woven thing. Like what was that, the genesis of that project? So it seems like that was already like, hey, next gen material, and hey, now we can eliminate leather, which makes sense.
Yeah, and how fun is that?
Yeah.
Because if you're a designer just saying, okay, well, go use another material, but investigate and think about the Apple customer and what they might be drawn to as a replacement was part of the fun for them. So again, it goes to that idea of it's not me, It's them doing what they do best. They're brilliant designers and bringing that to with a sustainability lens.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, I've been playing with the new phone for a few days, and got the new cases. I think they're actually a lot better than the photography said. Apple usually has great photography. I was telling Josh, I was like, I don't know, the high contrast thing might not work for this. It looks a little rough on screen. It's actually quite nice in the hand. I really like it.
Nice.
So I think they nailed it. You can go tell them like, hey, good job.
All right, I will.
Like they care about what I think, but
yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
okay. And then I guess the sort of arcing question is like, in terms of a company the size of Apple and the scale of Apple, like what is the message downstream from there? Because Apple obviously has an enormous amount of resources available to it. So when you're laying out this plan and how you do it, how do you compartmentalize that in a way that helps other companies see themselves in that arena, where they can go like, hey, we can do this. We don't have trillions of dollars in income over 10 years, but we can still accomplish this.
Yeah. First, we work with our supply chain because those are companies we have relationships with in order to make products. So there's a basis of trust and kind of a way of working together. Second, we have a roadmap for Apple 2030, just like we have a roadmap for products. I'm not allowed to talk about those, but the roadmap for Apple 2030 had to go through all the way up to Tim and all the way up to our CFO. Because the idea was, and I've had this happen to me every time I ever just want to buy my way out of a challenge.
Right.
Nope. We can invest. So Apple can go first and find a new material or make a new, material. Like we have 100% recycled cobalt in the batteries in Series 9 watches, which is part of our materials story. Exciting. We can do that. Or tungsten or rare earth materials. But by the time it gets to a product like Series 9, it has to scale. And it has to do so at a price that makes sense within the business that we run. So I think our job is to lead, to innovate, and then to help other companies because of our demand, they can now meet that demand in a way that changes the system, that transitions the system.
Yeah, it's always good when you see the light of yes in the CFO's eyes because okay, this is probably going to get done, right?
Yeah, it's a painful process, but it's an incredibly important one. I mean, and that's part of the reason we did the video, part of the reason we did the product, is that we know our colleagues out there, a few have said to me, I'm using this. I'm using this to show that I'm not coming in asking you to do something really hard and really painful and really bad. I'm asking you to do something to help move this transition along. And that makes me super happy.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Have fun,
and thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.